Hello, Degrassi fans, and welcome to the Degrassi Kid Podcast, where each week we break down the history and impact of our favorite teen TV show. I'm Jocelyn, and this week we're joined by a very special guest. We're joined by Duana Taha. Duana joined the writers team at Degrassi The Next Generation from season 6 to season 11, where she wrote unforgettable episodes like What It Feels Like to Be a Ghost, which deals with Craig's addiction storyline, Jane Says, which takes Jane's childhood trauma and brings it to light when she grows up. And of course, episodes like Cry Me a River, which feature Dave and Adam hosting their radio show, Mano a Mano, which talks about things like trans rights. But most importantly, she wrote my all-time favorite episode of Degrassi. She wrote Chasing Pavements, which has that incredible quote from Fiona Coyne saying, "Mom, I'm in love with her and she's a girl." This episode quite literally changed my life and helped me come out of the closet when I was in high school. So, what does it feel like for Duana to write such an impactful episode of television? How did she feel when she went from being a Degrassi fan herself, watching Degrassi High growing up, to now writing for the show years later? We're going to talk about all of that and more on a brand new episode of the Degrassi Kid Podcast. But first, let's rewatch my favorite moment on Degrassi, when Fiona Coyne comes out of the closet in season 10.
I love her, Mom, more than anyone in the world. And she's sleeping in my room.
Oh, honey.
Mom, I'm in love with her. And she's a girl.
Oh.
Duana Taha, welcome to the Degrassi Kid Podcast. I am so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I know I've said thank you a million times in all of our messaging together, but I just have to again one more time say, like, you wrote the episode of Degrassi that made me a super fan of the show, and I am so honored that I get to spend like 60 minutes asking you anything I want to know about Degrassi and your time on it. That's just huge to me.
Oh, I mean, thank you so much for caring that much, for having that connection. You know, like that is the amazing part, is that you never know which stories, which things, which lines are going to resonate with who. And so it's wonderful to know that like small parts can make kind of big impacts on people. And I have that from this show, from other shows. So I get it.
Oh, I really like that. And I'm curious because since this episode came out, I have not stopped talking about it. I'm curious, how much do you know about my story? Has it like come up on your feed before? Has it been mentioned to you before?
So yeah, I've heard, I think, the story or parts of the story from other people in the Degrassi family. I don't know if I've heard you tell it.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I'll give you the quick rundown because I have a whole spiel about it. But essentially, I grew up as a closeted kid in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where no one was saying it was okay to be gay, or not okay to be gay, but also no one was saying it was. No one was really talking about it. And I grew up watching Fiona. We both started high school at the same time. And I had no idea that all those little things, you know, pretending to have boyfriends so boys would stay away from her, having these complicated feelings about her best friend, was culminating into this big Chasing Pavements episode where she was going to come out of the closet. And quite literally, when I sat there and watched her say the phrase, "Mom, I'm in love with her and she's a girl," it clicked for me exactly right then. And I started the process of coming out of the closet from that, literally that exact quote. So that is what made me a champion of Degrassi. It made me learn that there's a history behind it, that they wanted to help kids like me. And that is why I'm specifically obsessed with that specific line on Degrassi.
I'm so glad. You know, obviously in anticipation of this conversation, I went back and reread the scripts and rewatched the episodes. And I actually love how incidental and monumental it feels in the same moment. You know, like it's very sort of it's very still. So I'm really happy that that landed, and there was enough sort of space around it for that to land for you.
Oh, I love that. It feels so cool to be able to finally talk to you about this. And we're going to really deep dive into Degrassi. But before we do that, I want to know, my favorite Degrassi quote is "I'm in love with her and she's a girl." What's your favorite Degrassi quote?
I know. So you mentioned this, and I have been really tossing around so many. There's a few contenders. Could we possibly come back to this right at the end? And
We can.
Because I'm sure something else will have jogged right now. I'll tell you right now, there are kind of 3 or 4 contenders. But I'm trying to see what really encapsulates. I don't know if there is one, but we'll see.
Okay, I will follow up back at the very end and we'll see.
Okay.
And no pressure, you won't be committing to getting that quote tattooed on your body for the rest of your life, I promise.
Nobody's saying no.
I like that. And did you know that I have the quote for Chasing Pavements tattooed?
I I did know that. I think maybe some people on the marketing team at Degrassi had showed me a picture or a post of yours. It's like that is truly incredible. That's something that does not happen to many writers with even much more illustrious careers than mine. That's a real honor that I don't even know if I will ever be able to process. That's incredible.
Oh, well, I love that. I love that I even got to show it to you or talk to you about it. So I feel very full circle moment for me. And one of my favorite fun facts about you is, Duana, you were a fan of Degrassi before you actually got in the show, which I think is every Degrassi's fan's dream to end up as a writer. Where did your love of Degrassi start, and what was it that made you connect with it?
Oh, well, so it's funny because I absolutely was a fan of the show beforehand, but I was a fan of the original recipe to the point where I wrote a letter to probably like the CBC that was airing Degrassi, being like, hey, what if I think I said the twins' little sister. What if that was me? Because, the curly hair, that was the easiest connection I could make at that time. Obviously, I don't even think I addressed it properly. There may or may not have been a stamp. But so I really followed it early often. I remember loving how they spoke, that everybody talked in a way that felt real. And then so when the show came back, obviously I was also a fan of The Next Generation. But it sort of felt a bit more like, well, this is this thing I used to love. And what are those crazy kids up to? I didn't think when the show came out, oh, maybe I can fulfill those dreams of being, Heather and Erica's little sister. I wasn't still hanging on to that into my 20s.
Okay, I love that. Well, that actually segues perfectly into our first fan question from Megan, who wanted
Yeah.
to know, how do you think a young Duana would feel knowing that she grows up to become a writer on Degrassi?
I felt incredibly, incredibly lucky. And actually, to be honest, I think I know that more now than when I first landed that job. That was my first TV writing job, which is preposterous. I had been working in TV before then, but in a different in kind of daily, non-scripted TV.
Mm.
And I was thrilled to get to that show and to get to play in that world. But even now, in retrospect, to go, wow, the first job that you got was that immersive, that incredible, that you got to touch all the aspects of production. That doesn't happen, especially now. So I feel luckier even now. I hope that little girl knows. But I think we're both very happy.
That is so exciting. That's how I feel about when I think about my younger self who was growing up and watching Degrassi. And now the fact that I get to talk to the people who were on the show, like Annie Clark, who played Fiona, is the one who told me to start this podcast. And it led to these opportunities where I get to talk to people like you. Like it feels younger me would think I'm the coolest version of myself right now. So I think young Duana would probably feel the same about you.
I have to say, I think that's probably one of the biggest gifts that Degrassi gave a lot of us in front of and behind the camera was kind of going, well, why not? Just do the thing. Either because you watched a fictional character do the thing, or because, you sort of saw, oh, this is how people react to young people kind of being themselves. It sort of gave you that, like, anything could happen. So, why
Yeah.
not find out what that anything is?
I absolutely agree. And a lot of us fans are curious about the process of how you go from being a fan to the writer. That question came in from Mike. Can you walk us through your journey of becoming a Degrassi writer?
Yeah, again, I feel a little bit reticent to say, oh, this is what happened, because it does not always happen this way. I had a roommate and eventually also a Degrassi writer, Vera Santa Maria, who was getting into screenwriting. And, I was going off to my job and she would kind of appear outside my door in the morning being like, what's a funny way to say somebody fell out a window? And I thought, I want to do that. At that time, the way to get a writing job was to write a spec script of a show that was existing, not an original. This is where Toronto is a very small town and Canada is a very small town. I sent it to an agent, and as is custom, that agent had his assistant read it. That assistant recommended it, and is the reason that I got the conversation with that agent. And that assistant later turned out to be a Degrassi writer and showrunner of many years, Matt Heater. So it's all a very small world.
Oh my God, there's so many pre-existing Degrassi connections that I never would have guessed that all of those were kind of like cosmically woven together, it feels like.
Yeah, it really does at times feel like that. Yeah. And so it just so happened that the show was looking for a an entry level writer, a coordinator, and that it was one of those a little bit right place, right time situations.
That is incredible. Then you get on the show and now you're working with people on Degrassi. How did they react to the fact that you are such a huge fan of the show?
Well, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm sure I tried to keep that a little bit on the DL. I tried to
Mhm.
be a little bit like chill about it. Because of course I was at that time I was in my 20s, but I was much younger than the rest of the writing staff. So for them,
Mm.
Degrassi had meant something different. It came out when they were, maybe in high school or even a little older than that. So it didn't kind of have the same real significance. They were not running to university or wherever they were, after high school and talking about the episodes that happened the way we were in sort of sixth grade. So
Mm.
I'm sure I tried to downplay it a little bit. But at the same time, it was very clear early on that having the knowledge of what had happened came in real handy.
That's what I'm curious about. When you're a fan of the show, you're aware of it and you go into the writer's room. Does being a fan help you as a writer, or is there any challenges that come with it with knowing the show so deeply?
Well, what happens is, of course, there's being a fan of the show, which is the show that you see, and then there's the production of a television program, which is completely different. So, for example, I read the Chasing Pavements scripts before coming on today, as well as looking at the episode, and there are lots of things that are cut that don't get included. There are things that different actors affect how you see a storyline or how much, it's like, oh, that person wasn't available, or maybe, that wasn't a storyline originally for them. So all of that to say it helps, but you also, I think this is true for any writing job.
Mm.
You want to come in aware, but also really devoted to being completely open to whatever is required in the room.
That makes sense. Is there when you were reviewing everything, also thank you for reviewing everything. The amount of care you put into this interview like means a lot to me. But is there anything that you noticed that you were like, oh yeah, that was different or that was missing, even if it's just a small little detail?
I mean, for example, I think that in these two episodes in Chasing Pavement, there were a few more dialysis scenes, for example, that took place in dialysis. And I remember that being something that we were talking about a lot, how to have the Holly J character involved, not just in these episodes, but in that whole sort of last arc of season 10, while also being straightforward about what it would look like to have that sort of significant a medical issue. And,
Mm.
so it could be that scheduling might change those things. It could be that the actor or the set were unavailable. Small things like that that
That is
come into
cool.
play. And always there are trims. So there's always things by design that are not necessarily going to make it to the end.
Okay, this is so cool because I've primarily talked to the actors on the show who can tell me a
Mhm.
lot about the afterward and being on set and stuff, but I've never really had someone like break down the process of an episode before. So this is I've heard that fact of the minute per page, but I guess I never really considered the context of even like what removing a page is like or removing a scene is like in a script. So that's like very cool to know.
Yeah, and different for every show, obviously, but that was how it worked for us.
Okay, I like that. And I mean, I think Degrassi fans wish that if they could live anywhere, they'd want to live in the writer's room. Can you kind of paint us a picture of what is the writer's room at Degrassi actually like?
Uh, it was brightly colored, and it was, bright yellow, I think, lots of whiteboards on every wall.
Mhm.
And we had armchairs with wheels that were they were quite, I think, vintage. I think they'd been around for a while. But there was a lot of us sort of, if you wanted to make a point, kind of scooting across the room to make your point on the whiteboard. I noticed that you have the headshots behind you in every writer's room. The headshots are always up on one wall or around the room so that you can kind of, gain inspiration about who you're talking about as you go, that kind of idea.
That is so cool. Okay, I like that. That makes me see the headshots a little bit differently now. Now I can pretend I'm in the Degrassi's writer room.
Absolutely.
And I've always kind of been curious because there is such a huge history to Degrassi, and it also has these fundamental rules. Like, it's always from the kid's perspective. We take these stories seriously. We're not preaching about what's right or what's wrong. How do you come in as a writer and possibly learn all of these rules? Is there kind of like a training session, or what's that like?
No, I think it is very much the only way out is through, or the only way in this case is through, is, some of that stuff you pick up by osmosis without really knowing.
Mhm.
Sometimes it would come up in a pitch, where you'd be pitching to Linda or, to the network, and somebody would say something about, well, we really like this because that adheres to our rule of, the kids are always the ones solving their problems, or this
Mhm.
kind of goes against our usual philosophy, but it's okay because of this reason. So, but there's not sort of people talk about and used to talk more about show Bibles, like
Mm.
where that is essentially a set of rules.
Yeah.
But I think those things evolve over time.
For the listeners, Linda Schuyler taught us what the show Bible was, which was very cool to hear the kind of grandness of it. And I was curious if it existed even into like season 14. I would say that if they had one, the Bible would have to be this big, full of facts. So it's cool that it's through osmosis. That's really interesting.
I think eventually, yeah. I think originally there may have even been, yeah, documents, but by the time you got to, episodes 100, it does sort of get to the point where reading gives you more of a shorthand than those kind of rules that were written maybe 5 or 7 years before.
That is so cool. And when you came into the writer's room, was there anything that you were excited to pitch, or do you remember anything that you did pitch?
I you had mentioned a question maybe like this, and I thought about this a lot. And the answer is I was less excited to pitch things or, stories or issues than I was to explore, well, who else is that character? And that's something I really love about the show, that we never sort of went, okay, well, this is when we're going to do our drag racing episode or the episode about cocaine. It was always about, well, what is in this character that we haven't explored yet? What's going to happen to, whomever, Ellie or Jane or Darcy at this point in their lives. And so I remember being really excited to work more with characters, to kind of
Mm.
work with I think I have a soft spot for girl characters who put their feet in their mouths. Please have somebody take that out of context because I'm going to be sorry I said that any minute now. Um, or just sort of people who have the best of intentions, but it doesn't always go well. Those are always, I think, the most fun
Mm.
for me.
That's exciting. Well, it's amazing that the next question that I have for you is from Max, who wants to know, are there characters whose voices come naturally when you're writing, and are those others that are kind of tougher for you to find?
Definitely there are. And there are characters that, you sort of find as you go. You're like, oh, I didn't know that that was kind of the trick to that character. For example, I remember since we were talking about Spinner, obviously there are those malapropisms that he uses, sort of using words not quite right. And Brendan York was excellent at the Spinner voice for sure.
Mm.
But I was like, oh, he's always quite sincere, though. He doesn't cover over what he is feeling. He tells the truth.
Mm.
Or, to me, Paige was fun and was easy because it was clear to me that I know people love to say, oh, she's Queen Bee, she's bitchy, she's whatever. But to me, I was like, oh no, she's truthful to a fault. And the tone is just the cover that makes it sound, like it's coming from kind of personality, but she just is incapable of lying, or she gets that sick feeling to her stomach, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, and it did make it exciting when there were new characters, because then you could really kind of wander around and go like, who are they? And what is this new character gonna, or this new performer gonna do with these words that we've written? And that unlocks a lot about the characters too.
Wow, that is so cool. And I think that depth is what we love about Degrassi characters so much is there's not that typecast of like, oh, they're this specific way. It's that those layers of, yes, they might be perceived this way, but this is who they really are and this is what they feel that they're conveying. So it's cool to hear the writing process behind that. The next thing I wanted to ask you is because so many Degrassi actors have come on the podcast and they've shared their read-through experience. So we've heard it over and over. They walk into a room, it's almost kind of like an exam. The script is face down. Typically, they don't know what's about to happen until they flip it over. But a few people in that room do know what's about to happen, and one of them is the writers. So can you share from your experience, what is it like to be in the read through when you know what's going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we should explain the philosophy behind the whole face down business.
Mhm.
Was I think even maybe in the previous era of Degrassi, was there to get the performers authentic experiences.
Mm.
And so that, we would see them process in the moment and react, to things as they were happening. So that was the reason why you were really watching for. Often there had been, either internally or maybe from the network, there had been questions about, well, do kids really say this? Or, is this authentic, a reaction or whatnot? So we would be watching, okay, let's see what happens on page 7 when that one line happens. Let's see what happens when this reveal happens. And sometimes there were, people would you could see people look at each other like, what is that? Or sometimes it would go perfectly well and they would get it. And we'd be like, okay, good, that went well.
That is cool. Again, so cool to hear the behind the scenes. I think I've heard like 30 different people's perspective of what it's like to read a script, but I've never heard that kind of beforehand of what you're actually looking for. So that's really neat. And it leads to a question from Yuka Raya, who wants to know, do you have any examples of a time that you were in a read through and it led you to change something in your script?
I don't. I will say that one of the things that was incredible about Degrassi, and this is true, I think, of all great writing rooms, but especially was so well modeled at Degrassi, was every script belonged to all of us in a way, which is to say that, there were scripts that, of course, I would write that were my stories and my responsibility. But once they got to that read through point, we're all kind of trying to make them great. They're a team sport, So sometimes it would be the showrunner, of course, saying like, that was too long. We need to lose 4 lines from here. And you go, yeah, of course. Or sometimes it would somebody else be like, it'd be a better joke there. I do remember a line that I pitched for another script, I think when Claire's parents were breaking up, and we would all pitch all the way along through every draft.
Mm.
But about when her mom says your father. And I remember having read and learned and known that, divorced kids are really dislike that sort of term of your mother, your father. And so Claire says, say dad. And then I think Matt tweaked it a
Oh.
bit, and I think Aislinn tweaked it again. And I think that's great that it is always kind of born out of all of us.
Claire, your father and I...
Dad! Say dad, you always say dad.
Claire. We're getting divorced.
Don't. I'll behave, I swear.
Honey, this has nothing to do with you.
That's interesting. And I love that level of care and the thoughtfulness of making sure that you get it right, even in that one specific word. That is very cool to hear. And from my understanding, so you are not there whenever the episode's being filmed, right?
Well, yes and no. I think this is, there are so many things, I have to be honest, that are unique about Degrassi as a production, that are different. I'm sure that that the actors would say, yeah, no, the writers were not there, and that is true. But we were just in a different part of the building, and B, we had a live feed of what was happening coming
I
in.
never knew this.
Yeah, so there was always, we weren't always watching all the time, obviously, because we're doing other things. We're writing, we're pitching, we're whatever. But if there was something that we, were like, let's see how that's going, we could always kind of check that out in real time. And if there was ever a reason to go down to the set, either for moral support or to clarify something or whatnot, we were a short walk away.
Do you remember any moments in Degrassi's history when you were on it of being like, "Ooh, I want to pay attention to this scene and how it's happening"?
I think I think one of the ones that we all remember was all of the all of the parts of Darcy's season 7 storyline when Darcy has she has her sexual assault and then kind of the resulting trauma. We all knew that those were like big acting lifts, and everybody thought that it was going to go quite well, that Shanae was capable, but we also knew it was going to be intense for her. So, there was watching those kind of things to go like, okay, how's it going? How many, that kind of thing. That's what comes to mind right off the top of my head.
It's interesting because I've never knew this whole part of it. So I didn't realize how much of it was I kind of thought it was like, okay, here I wrote the script, now I'm going to go on. But I didn't realize how much it was keeping the pulse on the story until it's kind of its final product.
Another thing that is really a relic of a different time is that a lot of the time now, a lot of shows write their scripts and then they go and shoot them. And we were very much of sort of an earlier era where we might be writing episode 12 while they were shooting episodes 3 and 4. So you could sort of see something happening and react and kind of go, oh, that's an interesting chemistry between those two friends. Let's see if we, put them in more stories or whatnot.
That is so cool. And do you remember a time where you wrote something and then you're watching it getting performed and it kind of felt a little euphoric or maybe even feeling like, oh, wow, I didn't expect this layer added to that performance?
All the times.
Oh, I love that.
All the times. Honestly, it felt bananas to go, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe that you think something up and then it appears or you sometimes you'd have to name a retail establishment or something and you'd see them kind of painting the sign. You go like, that's bizarre, that's crazy that they did that. It was, I that is a feeling that never gets old. I've been lucky enough to be doing this for almost 20 years and it feels euphoric every time.
Oh, I love hearing that so much. And now we're going to get into the part of the episode where I ask you about the one specific episode that I love so much, Chasing Pavements, because not only are you a Degrassi writer, to me, you are you are my favorite episode. Like, you're the Degrassi writer to talk to. Are you prepared for me to ask everything I've ever wanted to know about Chasing Pavements?
I absolutely am, and I hope that I can do it justice.
I'm excited. I'm so excited. You really are doing a lot of the work in teaching me how writing even happens on Degrassi. So I'm curious, can you just take me back to what does the early conversation look like around pitching something like Fiona's coming out story?
So we would talk at the beginning of the season about who is due for what kind of a storyline. What relationships do we want to explore more? What do we not? And I'm sure that I know that, coming out of Degrassi Takes Manhattan and sort of some of Fiona's antics there, we were aware that we were going to explore more. As the Bobby stories took shape, and then you kind of go, well, where's this going to go? And the Adam character had been introduced also early that year. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we necessarily knew right off the top that Fiona and Adam were going to have a connection that was going to lead somewhere. But it takes shape over time. Sometimes you're having a conversation about other characters altogether and going, oh, that character looks, a little too fond of that alcoholic beverage. And it's like, yeah, do they? Or actually, is it this other person? Or, that kind of thing goes back and forth. Like, whereas sometimes that there's something up with a character, that there's something that is unexplored, but you toss around a few different ideas about what it could be before you really get to understand it, like to the get point where you're like, No, that feels right.
That's interesting because I've done the deep dive in Chasing Pavements 100 billion times, I think, on the internet. But my whole story is kind of like there was these breadcrumbs in Fiona's story. She got to Degrassi. She had moved from a different place, and she pretended that she still had a boyfriend back home. She starts dating Riley, so the boys will start leaving her alone. And those that kind of cloud over her head, I think, exists in season 9 of like, why can everyone figure out relationships in high school but me? Or like, why do I even not want to be in a relationship? And so Glenn's question was, were those breadcrumbs intentional?
I think to a certain extent, it really becomes an alchemy. And this is why I was talking about like we get to watch while the earlier episodes are shooting and we're still deciding. Yeah, I think those breadcrumbs are there to point in a direction. But when is the time to kind of pick them up? And are they going to add up in the end, so to speak, to the same thing we thought they were going to a season or two ago? You sort of you watch where things go and you sort of go, okay, what could that be? I remember, it also depends on there's the character, Fiona Coyne, in the conception of, and then the performance, of course, adds to that as well, right? The kind of watching the performer, Annie Clark had that great 1,000-yard stare as Fiona. Like no matter what was happening, she sort of was there, but also a little bit above it, a little bit removed. And so it was kind of something that made you go, well, what's going on behind those eyes? Like, what's she thinking? What's she having, what's processing?
That is very cool. Annie Clark is my favorite actress. So to hear how her performance kind of shapes the role of Fiona is very cool. And it's just so cool to hear this from you because I remember like the reason I connected so much with Fiona was those breadcrumbs, having no idea that it would ever lead to Chasing Pavement. So it's interesting how almost intentional but not intentional that story is, and it's really cool to hear that.
Well, I think it comes back to we always wanted to make sure that those breadcrumbs, we wanted to make them true to kids. They're not all going to be true to everyone, but we wanted to be like, is this accurate? Is it accurate that there would be, a young girl who was blasé but also confused about relationships? Yeah, probably. Is it accurate that there would be somebody who would like that sort of cover of having a boyfriend without actually having to engage in boyfriend-like activities? Yeah, that's probably accurate. That's probably something that we've seen. So, and we tried to be, is it true for teens in general? Probably. Is it true for all? Of course not. Was it true for Fiona? Yes. And that's sort of where we would triangulate to get there.
That is so cool. Okay, I think we've captured how we got up to Chasing Pavements, but with you as a writer, it's your job to sit down and write the episode. Like what kind of is going on? Where do you start? What's in your mind? How do you make that episode come to life?
So the process is obviously there's sort of planning. As I say, we're all involved in every episode. So maybe somewhere along the way, we would sort of look at the next 8 episodes, 10 episodes, and our showrunner, Brendan York, for the years that I was there, and James Hurst right at the beginning, would kind of go, okay, well, we know we need to tie up, say, Fiona's going to get a 2-parter at some point, Eli and Claire, we got to deal with the end of the Alley story, etc. And so it's a little bit of Lego blocks, a little bit to go, oh, you know what? And you might initially know, okay, well, Duana, you're going to write that Fiona story and this Alley story. And then sometimes, the B story, the C story, sometimes they shift around, right? Like, oh, actually, if we put up this other, Holly J story, then that dialysis can be a factor in the Fiona story or similar, so things get moved around. And that's the whole writing staff is working on all of those things. And the whole writing staff helps break the story, whether it is your own or somebody else. When it's yours, you're kind of the one driving the ideas, but everybody's there with you going like, well, maybe there needs to be a stumbling block early on in the episode. Degrassi had a real formula for how we broke an A story was this many beats, a B story was this many beats. So we would work that out. You kind of get the story to a place where it felt good. We would pitch to Linda and to the networks, either verbally or via sort of one-page outlines. And then that writer of those episodes would go off and flesh it out into a full outline, get some notes, flesh it out into a first draft, get some notes, into a second draft, get some notes, and everybody's kind of weighing in often. And
Wow.
so it goes, yeah. And then they'd be updated again after network notes, again after the read through. So it's a constantly evolving document. And everybody else is kind of doing that for episodes that are before and after your episode that you're working on as well. So it's very much a kind of many part assembly line ballet somewhere in the middle.
Wow, a lot of hands are touching before we see it, basically.
Absolutely, every time. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And it makes it better.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, Degrassi's the best show in the world, in my opinion. So I'm with you guys. And I know that sometimes Degrassi will pair their plots together because they'll explore similar themes. And in this episode, we have Fiona's coming out of the closet, Anya's dealing with Owen being a creep, and then Allie's trying to get the kids to pass the exam. Was there any kind of through line there that they were trying to pair together with this specific episode?
Not necessarily thematically. I remember that those episodes in particular being like, oh, I like that it's three girls having, three stories, like that they're driving all of them. Not that, there are great stories driven by boys or a mix of both, but I remember being like, oh, this is cool that this is how these go. But as I say, sometimes sometimes they'd mix and match. You might think you were writing a story about any two characters, and then it's like, actually, we're going to move this to another story or vice versa. But I think often we would try to pair, a heavy A story is going to need some comedic levity to balance it out, ideally, especially because we were always aware that the young viewers were young, and you want to give them, if you're giving them something that's hard to deal with. I know that we're talking a lot, for example, about Fiona's coming out, but in watching the episodes back, I had forgotten how intense the sort of deposition against Bobby was, and how much of the kind of violent storyline was there. And, sad to say that the story of Fiona not being believed is still all too current 20 years later. So we would try to balance intense things with things that were either lighter or more school-based or whatnot.
Yeah, that is interesting. And there's something that often has been pointed out by the Degrassi fans that Fiona's one of three queer female characters who go through an assault trial and then come out of the closet. We have Paige with Dean, we have Zoe with Luke, and then Fiona's different kind of assault, but with Bobby. As both a fan and a writer, what do you think about the fact that Degrassi often put these two kind of coming out story and abuse storylines together?
It's interesting. I don't know if I saw them kind of added up in that way. Obviously, looking back on, we know what we know now. Obviously, there are lots of choices in language and in depiction that we wouldn't necessarily make in 2025. There are also some things that I'm like, oh, I'm pleased that we were kind of, on the ball according to today's standards.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know whether I think there's necessarily a link, but I do think that talking about the negative parts of sexual experiences maybe made those characters have a little more freedom to discuss their sexualities in general, which maybe made it okay to kind of explore them in their minds. If something bad has happened, quote unquote, and you've lived to tell the tale, then maybe you feel a little more free in your mind to kind of think about other parts of your sexuality. I don't know if I can come down and say, sort of a declarative reason, but that's a really interesting parallel that you point out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think it sometimes can make those storylines more powerful when you have a woman who went through something that was so traumatic to now being like, no, this is who I am, and this is how I identify and who I love and that type of thing. But also on the flip side, there are 525 episodes of Degrassi. I think you could find you could come up with any kind of links and character overlaps and stuff. So it is cool to, I think, dive into, but also could just be that's just kind of statistically likely that these kind of storylines overlap for sure.
For sure. And that was something that came up a lot. We would talk about like, oh, well, did we deal with such and such an issue before? Maybe. Is it, is there a way that we can make it different either because of who it's happening to or because of the the tonal change that has happened since the last time we explored X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing was something that we talked about a lot.
Okay, I like that. And the very start of Chasing Pavements, it opens with, Fiona's graduating from rehab. She's using you throughout the episode, she's using her grounding techniques, counts things she can see, hear, and touch. As a writer, what is your role in understanding how rehab may have affected Fiona, and then how does that work itself into the script?
So we always made sure to have consultations with experts in
Mhm.
those contexts. I know we always made a point of having them be based in reality,
Mhm.
and we would be asked about it too. The networks were always really concerned to make sure they were portraying things that were real and accurate. So we would sort of say, this is where this idea came from. This is where we explored this kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly why fans like myself and other people who love the show is because there's so much care put into every single line, every single moment. It's about making sure that it's authentic to a teenager somewhere and what they're going through.
That's right. Yeah.
And of course, this episode builds up into the biggest moment where Fiona says her pivotal line, I'm in love with her and she's a girl. I know that you've just revisited the episode, you've revisited the script. Is there anything you can kind of tell me about the behind the scenes of how we got to this line specifically?
That's a really interesting question because I think that, I personally, I was a younger writer. And one of the things that I learned over the years and that was really trained into me at Degrassi was, we like humor on the show. We like sort of snappy lines. We like all those kinds of things. But sometimes simpler is a lot better. And I suspect that that line is one that, it might have originally been a little wordier, and then got sort of more simplified because really that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
And I think Fiona kind of saying that without kind of qualifying it or without going on one of her longer winded explanations kind of makes her confidence and her security in that feel really secure.
I agree, and I think the fact that it is just so clear, I think is what made me love it so much because I get asked all the time, there's other queer storylines on Degrassi. Why didn't you connect with those? And one of the answers is I grew up alongside Fiona, so I was kind of watching. Marco was older than me; it was in the past, but I know Marco has such a definitive "because I'm gay" to Spinner, and Riley tells Peter I'm a homosexual, and the fact that Fiona has this kind of like I'm in love with her and she's a girl. And then later has a line saying, I might be gay, I might be homosexual, I haven't chosen the nomenclature yet. The fact that it was just about who you are and not the defining, now I have everything figured out is exactly the thing that made this the queer storyline that resonated with me so much.
I think too, looking back, we didn't have then the language that we have now. Maybe today Fiona would identify differently. Maybe today
Yeah.
she would call herself pan or would have some thoughts about her gender identity. Maybe she wouldn't. I think we were trying to approximate at that time that was part of that liberation we were talking about earlier, right? Fiona's
Yeah.
been through some stuff, and part of that means that, in some ways she's a very privileged person in terms of her wealth, in terms of her kind of the respect that she's always felt like she is deserving of. And so part of that was her getting to say, I'll decide when I decide
Yeah.
uh, how I want to be identified and what that means.
I love that. I also again have to pause to say like thank you for writing this moment because there's like the way that this is written, of course the way it's performed, but the way it's written, it like had a grip on me as a teenager and is what made me such a champion of the show forever. So again, very thankful that I get to ask you all these questions.
Thank you for saying that. I do remember, really feeling like it was that this was one of those ones that just when you're writing it, just kind of going like clearing out the noise and going like, what is the most honest version
Yeah.
of what this looks like? So I'm glad it felt truthful.
It did. And then the next layer of that is that Annie Clark performs it. And I know you just recently watched it for this podcast. What moments stand out to you in Annie's performance versus from you writing it to her bringing it to life through Fiona?
I'm glad you asked that because I remembered writing it, of course, and I remembered the performance and whatnot. But I think what I didn't necessarily clock back then was that by the time she admits it, she delivers it with a bit of a smile. Like she's already feeling a bit lighter for having admitted it to herself and sort of saying it out loud. And of course, that's something that I've heard from a lot of people that I've experienced in different contexts. That when you finally speak your truth, you feel amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether the director of that episode sort of spoke to her about that specifically, or whether that was something that Annie came to, or even whether we talked about it in the read through or otherwise. But I'm looking back at that moment when she says that, and it's so kind of beautifully lit and kind of intimate, and she's having that moment with her mom. It feels, I remember just being like, wow, she's really in possession of that moment.
Mm. She does it so well. I mean, Annie Clark's the best actress there is, in my opinion.
I
I like
also
that.
give a shout out though to Joy Tanner. In general, the adults on the show, Joy was had they would come in and come out. The adults were only there when they were there. But I also love her in that moment. Just kind of, we knew that she would be an accepting parent, but I
Mhm.
really think that the moment that she sort of processes what Fiona is saying, especially after everything that she's been through, is really touching. That she's sort of a bit like, oh, like thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that little bit of yourself. So that really struck me.
I'm in love with her. And she's a girl.
Oh. Oh, okay.
I've never felt like this about a guy. Any guy. Ever. I know now that I never will. Are you shocked? Are you disappointed in me?
Oh, Fiona Celestine Arabella Coyne. All I want for you is to be happy, no matter who you love.
Why do I have to love her?
I agree, and I think I might start to like cry during this part because like this is the best. This episode changed my life. But the there's a big difference between having a character come out of the closet and the reaction to that, and having her just like embrace her daughter so openly made me think because oh my gosh, I don't want to cry during this. I'm so sorry, but I remember in that episode. Fiona's mom like is unfazed about Fiona dating Adam. She seems very open, and there's all these kind of signals that she's always going to support her daughter. She supports her through the trial. She supports her through everything. Every time she comes to her mom, she's there for her. But Fiona still has that little bit of a doubt. She says, "Are you disappointed in me?" And I remember, my mom was like, she was best friends with gay men, and she was their maid of honor. She would go to pride parades, but it felt so different when it was like me. And so seeing the way her mom so openly embraced her is what made me feel so okay to talk to my mom and be like, "Do you see Fiona? That's me too," and start that same conversation. So, I didn't want to cry during this.
I mean, I don't apologize. I think this is what we're all trying to do every time we make art or talk about it is go like, yeah, let's create these opportunities. And I mean, I think that no parents are perfect.
Hmm.
And I am a parent now, and I am certainly not perfect. But I think that you get to see those moments where it's like, oh, this is something happening in real time in front of me.
Yeah.
And I think they both felt like they really lived in that moment. And I really liked
Mhm.
how much she was able to kind of trust what Fiona was saying.
Yeah.
And that's sort of one of those things too that, we talk about the evolution of stories. When those two characters or three characters, the Coin family were introduced in season 9, we sort of there was a collective like, oh, look at flighty Fiona. Oh, she's so kind of spendy and frivolous and whatnot. I think that was an evolution not just for Fiona to say this is who I am, but for her mother to kind of be like, I'm shifting my sort of categorization of my kid in my head to be a different young woman than I thought she was, not just because of her sexuality, but because of her
Yeah.
self-possession, because of how she knows herself.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. Oh, I think the episode overall, even then later you have Holly J just so openly being like, is there a love interest? The tone of her coming out felt so different compared to the other storylines. It felt so just like it's a fact. Like it's not there's no opinion behind the fact. It's just a fact. And the way that each scene was written in this episode, I mean, it literally changed my life. It helped me become who I am.
I think I'm so touched to hear that. That is something that I do remember being really clear and overt in our writers' room.
Mm,
That if we were going to tell this story, it was going to have a different reception than other coming out stories. Than Marco's, which was by that point, 7 years before that. Than Riley, who had struggled in a very specific way. That this
mm,
was going to be something that would feel that could feel, and I can't believe that I have to qualify it that way, but it was a different time in a different way. That the situation was aligned such that it could feel hopeful for Fiona, and that was
yeah.
a reason that it really felt important for all of us that we wanted to tell that.
Yeah.
It's sort of
And
antiquated now. Like, of course it's hopeful. Why shouldn't it be?
yeah.
It's almost pedestrian now, but at the time that was a consideration that we'd be like, what, let's tell a story that, that's not even it's an important part of Fiona, but it's not even the roughest thing she's gone through that week.
Yes, exactly. And I almost feel a little silly now when I talk to younger people and I tell them that it's a TV show needed to help me come out of the closet because now queerness is so accepted. But I didn't know back the thing with I live in PEI and this was like 2011 is that just no one was talking about it. No one was saying anything against gay people, but no one was saying anything about gay people. So, and my only understanding of queerness was I knew Ellen DeGeneres was a lesbian. I knew about the show The L Word, where if you were like a 30-year-old woman, you would live in Los Angeles with other women. But what did it mean to be a 15-year-old lesbian in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island? Degrassi put that story on for me. So yeah, it's almost silly now how much I needed that TV show to help me, but I'm glad that it did.
I don't think it's silly in the sense that I think this is what we hope for, right? That absolutely. I have an almost 12-year-old, and so the things that are very matter of fact for them, I'm like, great. We are in some ways, please, we are marching forward as a society.
Mm,
That there are things about identity or gender identity or whatnot that are very like, and
yeah.
next. Just not even that remarkable. I think
Yeah.
that's what we were all hoping would someday be the case.
I love that so much. And it's really paid off for me because now I feel like my whole life career is just championing Degrassi, but specifically this specific moment. And me and Annie Clark were actually talking about you. She said, "Hey, I see you're having Duana on the podcast." And I was like, "Is there any type of question that you might have for her?" And we started talking because I bought your book, The Name Therapist.
Oh my goodness.
There's this
Oh,
hidden
thank you.
element to you that the audience might not know is that you are obsessed with names. You grew up with kind of an odd name. Crazy for me an hour and 10 minutes in to confirm it is Duana, right?
You know what's so funny? Yes, it is,
Thank
but
God.
also people say Duana, and that sounds right. And my parents, who are immigrants, kind of say it somewhere in the middle, like Duana. So nothing feels incorrect for me.
It's
So
on a
yes,
spectrum.
absolutely.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, we were talking about it because when you pull out of I'm in love with her and she's a girl, the next thing that Fiona says is, "Are you disappointed in me?" And her mom says, "Fiona Celestine Arabella Coin, I could never be disappointed in you." And as the name therapist, me and Annie were curious, what are your takes on the name Fiona Celestine Arabella Coin? Did you come up with it? Give me like your professional opinion on this name.
So I think I mentioned in the book that my contributions to Degrassi, all of which I'm incredibly proud of, are really like in line with the experience that I had at the time and the kind of how old I was as a writer kind of thing, except maybe where names were concerned. I think I did maybe have a bit of an outside influence. I know that I named Fiona and Declan Coyne. Coyne is my aunt's surname, so I borrowed that. And Fiona and Declan are, of course, Irish names, so I kind of, that are commonly used. I definitely remember putting in Fiona Celestine Arabella Coyne. I remember thinking at the time, like that seemed to me to be the height of kind of decadence to have two middle names.
Mm,
And so I remember thinking that. I remember thinking, I know that Celestine, I believed at the time came from Mrs. Coyne having had a friend at boarding school. I don't remember where I thought Arabella came from, but yeah, I definitely can take credit for those one-off middle names for sure.
That is so cool. And as this name expert, when people hear a name like Fiona Celestine or Bella Coyne, what are they interpreting about someone like that?
Great question. So to me, I think it goes back to what we were talking about with Fiona earlier. Just even in terms of like pure syllables, it's like, don't be afraid to take up space. Like, that is a name that is probably too long to fit on forms. Oh, well, it's like it takes some time. Fiona's going to graduate and it's going to be read out and we're going to hear all the full length of it. And it's like, yeah, you're important enough to have all that. So that was definitely the vibe that was behind that.
Overall, we know my fan reaction. Chasing Payments quite literally changed my life. I see my life as before Chasing Payments and after Chasing Payments in the timeline. But I'm curious have you heard other fan reactions either about Chasing Payments or the many other episodes of Degrassi that you have written?
I think I remember, obviously the fan response was not it was instantaneous, but it also wasn't. You had to seek it out a little bit more back then. But I just remember feeling really happy that it seemed to make sense to people, that it didn't, that was something that probably, I don't know the air dates off the top of my head, but I think it probably was, we probably cooked it up somewhere between 8 and 11 months before it aired, So to then kind of look back and go, okay, our intentions were clear, like what we were hoping to do came through, and looking back on the episode and even looking back on the little Anya and Owen storyline, I'm like, okay, as I say, sort of some of the external stuff is not what we would do today, maybe some of the language, but the intentions, I'm like, that holds up. That still comes through. It's still something that if my kid were watching or their friends, that I would feel okay going like, yeah, this is what we meant to say. And that's what you hope for with every episode, is that it is something that feels real, and that what you meant to say, what you were hoping would happen when it was, 2 a.m. and you're alone with your computer, is what actually came out in the end.
That is incredible. And how does it feel knowing that you grew up watching those stories on Degrassi and being impacted by stories like this, to now knowing that you were the person who wrote them for other Degrassi fans?
Like I said, look, you sometimes don't know what you don't know. And what I did not know, I kind of did, but what you don't really know when you are on a show as incredible as Degrassi, especially early on, is that not every show is going to be like that. Not every show is going to have truly devoted fans who take in those words and those shows and make them, important to them. That not every show is going to have the reach, is going to have the the sustainability. I am a tiny part of of a phenomenon that's been going for over 30 years at this point. So that's pretty singular, even if even if you were on sort of some of the other biggest shows of the time, it doesn't have an impact like this. It doesn't have a thing where it becomes part of dialogue, and it comes up in the craziest places. And that's the part that really just shocks me. Sometimes, some of the other writers and I who are still friends, but we're on different shows or different paths or whatnot. Sometimes somebody will run into a Degrassi reference on some other show that they're watching and will be like, who knew? We didn't know this was here. The one that truly blew my mind. I know it was Lauren Collins who sent it to me. It was one of the earliest Beyonce Ivy Park drops, and there were many different colors, and so each color had sort of a story. And the green one was Degrassi, and I lost my mind.
I did not know that.
I will see if I can find the screenshot in question. To me, to kind of go, so sorry. So somewhere there's a connection between Beyonce and Degrassi, I can die now. I will tell anybody who will listen that like I was like, I knew about Keke Palmer before you knew about Keke Palmer. But
Yes.
but those kinds of extensions that the show keeps on having sort of reverberations for all of us in one way or another. Um, it's singular. It doesn't happen very often, or even for a lot of people ever. So it's an incredible experience. I'm so happy to have been a part of.
Oh, I love that. And well, to me, you made a pretty big impact during your time in the show. But now I have to come around and ask you the big question. What is your all-time favorite quote on Degrassi?
Yes. Okay. So I actually am just coming to terms with the fact that I really uh, I might not I might not get all the way to having one specific quote.
And that's
Uh,
okay.
but I remember just thinking like I was thinking about a page line, about another line, but through this conversation, I think I am actually pretty happy with I haven't chosen a nomenclature yet. Because I think it sounds like Fiona sounds in terms of loving a kind of a frilly word. And because I think it does kind of speak to what I hope we were doing then and what I hope we're still doing now, and being like, that's okay to not have that nomenclature.
I don't want to date any more boys. As in, I like girls. I guess I'm gay or lesbian. I haven't chosen nomenclature yet.
Hell yeah. It makes an impact on me that your favorite quote is also from the best episode of Degrassi of all time.
Wow. How could I not?
I like that. Some final wrap-up questions for you. I know we've kind of touched on this a bit, but overall, are there any, you're still writing, you're still being very creative today. Are there any lessons that you learned on Degrassi that you're still kind of carrying with you into your future projects?
So many, so many. We were always reminded we were not making a children's drama or a youth drama. We were making a drama where the characters happened to be young people. And so to make them active, to make them choices, to make them people, essentially. Like, I think there are sometimes situations where kids on TV or in the context of adult books or whatnot are kind of either too simplistic or too childish or whatnot. And I think it's incredibly important to go, they're full people and they have fully operational brains. They don't always have the resources to do what they need to do, or they don't understand why they're doing what they're doing necessarily. But kids are people. That's one for sure. That there's often like preamble at the top of a scene that is unnecessary, both like from a production standpoint and also from a character standpoint, like letting the people say what they say, I think is a big one. And also that, maybe contrary to what I said earlier, often characters would come in with kind of a persona. I think when you're a young writer, you're like, well, no, nobody's just a tough girl or just or just a whatever, a follower, a this or a that. But those sort of structures then help you to explore, well, who else are they within that framework and where do they break out of it? So I think as a young writer, I was probably really resistant to like, "Ugh, stereotypes, man." But I think they're not stereotypes. They're just sort of initial impressions that you get to break out of.
That is really interesting. I could listen to you talk forever, but I do only have a few more questions for you, I promise. The final one, or one of the final ones, is kind of just like, what are you up to today? How could Degrassi fans support you if they're interested in learning more about Duana?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I am really happy that I got to sort of talk about a different story involving young people and families. Those are my real favorites. I created a show on CBC Gem last year called Near or Far. That we're really happy about twin sisters of mixed Middle Eastern origin, like myself. And so that exists on CBC Gem, and I believe there is an international link on YouTube that may or may not be operational. I wouldn't want anybody to do anything, less than entirely correct, but I'm sure there are ways to find it. And I am looking forward to cooking up more stories about complicated families. I also got to spend the last few seasons on The Next Step, which is in some ways sort of a spiritual cousin to Degrassi,
Yeah.
both writing and directing. So I'm excited to do more.
That is exciting. I'm excited to check that out. I'm also excited to read your book. I'll leave it link in the description for anybody who wants to read it. I'm just a few chapters in, but already I've been so aware of my name now and what other people think about my name when they hear it, and having a nickname like Degrassi Kid. Oh, I'm so excited to dive into this.
Thank you so much.
You're so
Yeah,
welcome.
that was a real fun one to explore.
Ultimately, you did it. You gave me over, oh my gosh, an hour and a half of your time diving into my all-time favorite episode of Degrassi. Duana, thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for all the praise. And I just want to say, like, obviously, I stood on the shoulders of giants. Like, all of us get to be a huge or a tiny part of this huge world. So to get to do a story that resonates with one person who in turn resonates with so many people, that's a huge gift. So thank you so much for having me.
That makes me feel so recognized and seen. Thank you. Okay, I won't take any more of your time, Duana. Thank you. This was literally a dream come true, and I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful time at the screening, and I'm sure we will talk soon.
Okay, bye. Good to see
Bye,
you.
Jocelyn.
Thank you so much to Duana for joining the Degrassi Kid podcast. It was so fun to not only go through this interview the first time, but even when I was editing it, I was just sitting here cheesing. I caught myself smiling so big so many times. I mean, this person is my hero. She wrote the episode of Degrassi that changed my life. I feel so grateful that she sat down to talk about it with me, which is so freaking cool. Now we have to say a thank you to our Patreon subscribers who make episodes like this possible. I could not have this job where I interview my dream guests without you. So let's say a thank you to our brand new Patreon subscribers. That's Brittany McLean, Jill Bree, and Alexandra DeBelli. That's a very cool name. I like that. Thank you so much for joining the Degrassi Kid Patreon for the very first time. I love you so much. We're also going to say a thank you to our existing Patreon subscribers who come back and back time and time again. That is Jolene, Rachel, Amber, Catherine, Shannon, Emily, Taylor, Christopher, Angelica, Nikki, Laura, Sarah, Mundo Man 333, Sue, Timmy, Dave, Brittany, Joey, Stephanie, Becca, Gina, Megan, Mina, Kristen, Lizzie, Sam, Casey, Darcy, Bridget, Katrina, Blue, Tawny, Legna, Nadia, Adam, Callie, Blue, B, C, Natalie, Max, Lauren, Tom, Holly, Julia, Jill, Aaron, Degrassi, Bumblebee, Jenny, I'm back up at the top here. Brittany, Randy, Lindsay, Alyssa, Kennedy, Kate, Amber, Emma, Chrissy, Mix, Lucy, Glenn, Lizzie Games, Samantha, Ashley, Sunita, Emily, Mike, Jamie, Sarah, Tierney, Lulu, Jeanette, David, Kate, Amber, Terry, Kylie, Paige, Anastasia, Olivia, Trevor, Sinner, and Midlife Misfit. Thank you guys so much for being a part of my Patreon. Again, could not do this without you. I love you so much. And I'll see you next week for a brand new episode of the Degrassi Kid Podcast. Bye.